Hi folks, Matthew Lanigan here with BayWa RE. I see people are still signing in, so we're just going to give it another minute or two and then we'll be right back with you. Thanks so much. Hi folks, Matthew Lanigan here again with BayWa RE. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here with BayWa. Really appreciate you taking some time to spend with us in SMA to learn about their commercial offerings. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. This will be recorded. It will be put up on our YouTube channel. If you haven't signed up for the YouTube channel yet, I'd like to encourage you to do so. You can find this webinar on there at the end of the day today, as well as all of our previous webinars. This will also be shared during our next monthly newsletter as well. Continuing education is a really big part of how we do things here at BayWa, so we're really happy to extend that to our customer base, and once again, appreciate you being here. If you do have questions, you can put them down in the chat box in the bottom right corner. We'll do our best to answer those. There will be breaks throughout, so we won't answer them on the fly, but there'll be lots of times for breaks. So I just want to test the chat box, make sure it's working. So if anybody's out there, if you could just maybe say hello to us real quickly and we'll make sure things are working. Great. Thanks, guys. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael Mahon with SMA's technical trainer out of beautiful Denver, Colorado. Michael?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate the opportunity. Let me see if I can share my screen. Hopefully that is all looking good and that folks can see that. Today's presentation is a bit of just updates. There will be at the very start an intro of a new product, but then I want to do some updates on existing product lines that cover the commercial and industrial string inverters from SMA. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into the intro for a new product coming early next year, the Sunny Tripower X. This is a worldwide platform for SMA. So it has already launched over in Europe and will be coming to North America early 2023. I believe we will have pricing and availability starting early January, and I don't know when delivery will be, end of Q1, start of Q2, that range. But a pretty exciting addition. So this will not be a replacement for our Core 1. It will be an addition to our commercial line for North America. And is intended for smaller applications. And then there's some nuance I'll talk about in the Core 1 presentation that may aid compliance with rapid shutdown in the US. So it'll be very interesting to see where it is used. I like to think of this as kind of a half of a Core 1. The Core 1 has 6 independent tracking channel inputs, with 2-string connectors for each of those 6 tracking channels. The Sunny Tripower X will have 3 input trackers with 2-string inputs per. I think benefit for lots of newer commercial projects is that this product has a higher short circuit and operating current input limit for each of those tracking channels. There is also the ability that will be very useful, I think, for smaller commercial systems. A lot of the functionality of the Data Manager M communication and control device from SMA will actually be integrated into the firmware of the Sunny Tripower X, so that without a data manager, it's possible to register a system of 1 up to 5 inverters directly to our NXOS Sunny Portal monitoring service, as well as potentially provide a little bit of closed loop control. So as we get closer to launch, we'll share more details on that. But for the smaller systems, I think the takeaway is that you could register to our NXOS Sunny Portal monitoring site without the additional cost of a Data Manager M. So that I think will be a very exciting. Many of the other features that currently exist in the Core 1 commercial line will also be duplicated in the Sunny Tripower X line. The SunSpec rapid shutdown transmitter, if you are utilizing module level rapid shutdown, that SunSpec transmitter makes it very straightforward. We'll have our shade fix energy optimization as expected in the Tripower X. The IV curve tracing feature that the Core 1 line now has will also be duplicated. And we'll have our free automated service support, smart connected functionality built in as well. So quite a bit that you've come to expect from SMA via the Core 1 will be duplicated in the Tripower X. So let's point out a few of the things I've kind of copied here on this data sheet, several things that are very similar from the Core 1 line. But first, the power classes for the Tripower X in North America will be 20, 25, or 30 kilowatts. So those will be the 3 available power classes. The inverter looks like what we're showing on the right. And we'll have a built-in DC disconnect, but unlike the Core 1 US, will not have an AC disconnect built into it. At launch, it will have UL 1741 SB listing, which I believe is going to be enforced or required very early in Canada, starting early 2023. So that will come with this product at launch. So we'll have that already. The important thing I wanted to point out for this product, again, that increase in the allowable short circuit current and operating current per input tracking channel for the Tripower X line. So we have a preliminary data sheet here showing the 20, the 25, and the 30 kilowatt models. The current limit here is now up to 37.5 amps short circuit and 24 amps operational per input channel. If you remember, for the Core 1, the current limits are 30 amps ISC and 20 amps operating. So that's a good boost over that Core 1 limit for higher, just higher power, bigger format modules or bifacial modules with a decent amount of backside gain, particularly if there is a lot of snow cover on the ground behind or below the array. That can definitely have an impact. The first row of the data sheet here, the maximum PV array power, you see that the data sheet supported DC to AC ratio is 150%, very similar to the Core 1. And the allowable way to exceed that data sheet DC to AC ratio without impacting the warranty will be exactly the same as the Core 1 and the PEAK3. That is, perform a design analysis in our design tool, Sunny Design, with the specific modules and system orientation and tilt that you expect wired up to the Tripower X. And as long as the full load hours is under a certain number, for the Core 1, it is 2,400 hours per year. I'm assuming it will be the same for the Tripower X, but I don't have that data in front of me, so we'll release that when we launch the product. But there will be some full load hours number, and as long as the design for your specific system shows that the full load hours remains under that number, you can exceed this datasheet DC to AC ratio. To do that, you always have to stay under the maximum DC voltage, which is 1,000 volts for the Tripower X, and the short circuit current limit, which again will be decently higher than the Core 1. So I think that will be very useful. And as we get closer to the launch of this, like I said, we'll provide more details on how that integrated system manager function works. I think it will simply be a slightly different step in the commissioning. You'll denote one of the Tripower X inverters as the system manager, and then it will gather data from the other devices in the system and can send that directly to the NX OS Sunny portal without the need of a standalone data manager imp. Obviously, the data manager imp will be fully supported for larger systems, or if there is a desire to do perhaps some power control, other more dedicated features might require the standalone data manager. So that's always an option with this product, but we'll have that ability to provide monitoring potentially without the extra cost of the data manager imp. So before I get into the Core 1, I don't know if there are any questions on the Tripower X. Be happy to take those right now.
We have one here from Brett. We see lots of 12208 grids in Canada. Don't suppose you have a 208 volt model?
According to the data sheet, if you see down here, nominal AC voltage, 277,480 will be the supported grid form at launch. If there is a desire to potentially have a 12208 model, I would absolutely love if you could forward that on via email to me. There has been discussion of having that as an option for this product line, and I've heard far more supportive discussions of that than any other product, commercial product for SMA. So please actually send that data that there is a demand for that to me via email, and I can forward that to product management. So while I have not seen it in print, there have been active discussions to have that as an option. So as much ammunition as we can forward up to product management, that would have a better chance of it actually coming to fruition. So definitely, please, any and all feedback along those lines, feel free to forward on via email. That is great
Like
ammunition.
several people said there's demand for that here, so
yeah.
Hopefully folks will follow up. And then
yes, exactly.
We have another
please.
person.
Love to see it from actual customers. If I say it, it doesn't mean very much, unfortunately. So please.
Yeah, like lots of people are saying that it's definitely going to be required. Someone's also asking, is there potential for a 600 volt option as well?
For this model, I doubt it. I think you'll see later on, kind of, I think for North America, the PEAK3 is kind of the 600 volt output machine. So while definitely if you would like to forward that on via email as well, I'm less hopeful that certainly for the Tripower X line that we would see a model with a 600 volt three-phase output.
Great, that's it for now.
Awesome. No, great questions. Okay, so for the Core 1, I think most folks on the call are probably familiar with this product. We've had it for several years. You can see kind of some past history, award-winning stuff. I wanted to go over only a couple new features, so I don't want to spend too much time on the Core 1. And I'm showing these as new, but we've had these functionalities available via firmware in the US-41 line of the Core 1 for a while now. The IV curve tracing functionality, which again will be duplicated in the Tripower X line, and the ability to set AFCI detection to have the inverter perform an automatic restart if code allows it. So I want to hop onto those quickly. Before I do, I want to mention a feature for the Core 1 that is really, really important down here in the States, maybe less important for Canada, but I definitely want to mention it, as I think there are some racking manufacturers who might want to work with SMA. So you may hear discussion of this UL 3741. Right now, if module level rapid shutdown is required for the Core 1 line, we have several options for installers to use as module devices to work with the integrated transmitter in the Core 1. Again, we'll have that integrated transmitter in the Tripower X line for support of module level rapid shutdown. But many times, large commercial systems, it's very cumbersome, adds a lot of cost, adds a lot of install time. And there's a concern that you're adding devices where you're increasing the number of DC connectors on the system. And if it's a very large commercial roof with no shade objects, there's minimal interest in doing it for any type of energy optimization. So you're adding all this hardware just for code compliance reasons. We have a new listing for the Core 1 that allows for areas where the NEC, so down stateside, where NEC is being applied, to kind of come back and duplicate what commercial rapid shutdown is allowing in Canada much more rationally, I think, currently. So for us in the States, this UL 3741 listing, and it's primarily driven by the racking manufacturer, not the inverter manufacturer, but Solega and also the Iron Ridge BX system paired with the Core 1 inverter to get this listing. And what this listing is doing is testing potential shock hazards should a firefighter have to interact with a potentially damaged array utilizing this racking system. So they're testing to make sure that shock hazard is not significant, even if the array is damaged and a firefighter were to like fall in contact with it, or somehow they need to put an axe through one of these modules. That sort of fault current, making sure there's not undue shock hazard. So the Core 1 has been certified with the Solega Fast Rack 510 and the Iron Ridge BX system. It's this ballast type system you see here. And as long as that is installed per the manufacturer's requirement and all of the DC conductors finish within 1 foot of the array perimeter, which includes all these ballast tubs, the UL 3741 listing allows for full compliance with the the NEC requirements for rapid shutdown without requiring those module level devices. So I don't know that it sounds like the Canadian code's a little more rational about rapid shutdown for commercial systems than in the States. But if you hear this term 3741 and why it's important, why SMA will talk about it a lot, is because it allows that type of compliance with rapid shutdown without needing the module level devices down in the States. So that's, I think, an important one. We will support the module level devices, both the Core 1 and the Tripower X going forward, but it's nice to have these options. And so hopefully more and more racking manufacturers we can potentially pair with to get this listing for the Core 1 with different styles of commercial racking. Back to the 2 features I'd mentioned before the rapid shutdown segue, the IV curve tracing functionality and the ability to have automatic restarts after an arc is detected. The IV curve tracing feature, again, this is a firmware unlocked feature on the Core 1 US-41 lines. And what it allows is someone who's logged into the inverter, they can trigger the inverter to send each of its 6 tracking channels sequentially into an IV curve trace mode. So the inverter, when operating, someone logs in, clicks the start new measurement, and each of the 6 tracking channels, any of them that are wired up, will be taken offline from production and a IV curve trace sweep conducted. Then that tracking channel will go back into production. The next will perform this curve trace, and then the data will be shown in the user interface. And that can be exported as a PDF or as a data file with all of the data points that make up the curves. So this is a very nice feature to allow this IV curve tracing to be performed as kind of a regular maintenance functionality without having to disconnect, reconnect. This will work even if the module level rapid shutdown is being utilized. The curves will truncate at about 230 volts, and this part of the curve will not be taken. So it won't be sending those devices into shutdown because of the very low DC voltage. So it can work with or without the module level rapid shutdown without having to dismantle the array. And while this is definitely not as accurate as a dedicated IV curve tracing device, a handheld device, this is a great thing to be able to perform as part of a regular maintenance check for the health of the system. And if anything is seen that is untoward in these curves, then more detailed investigations can be performed with dedicated devices for this IV curve tracing. But this is done, and again, it's very simple. You're taking each of the tracking channels out of production for a short period of time to perform the trace, but you're not having to shut down the system to do this. So I think a very, very useful functionality that I want to make sure everyone is aware of. And again, this functionality will be duplicated in the Tripower X as well. The AFCI handling, recent code in the US has allowed for automatic restarts from an arc fault event if the incident energy of the arc is under a certain threshold and it is extinguished within a certain time period. So that is allowed. It is not the default behavior on the Core 1, even if they receive an automatic firmware update to this version from an older version, but it is a parameter that can be set by an installer if they desire that. So that's a nice option. If someone is considering using this, it is strongly recommended by SMA, even if you've turned on this automatic restart functionality. If you are seeing a system with lots of repetitive AFCI events, please treat those as real. We've had AFCI built into our inverters for more than 10 years now, and over those 10 years, we have, I think, vastly improved the accuracy and detection of fidelity of that functionality. So at this point, if you're seeing those errors, please do treat them as actual events. And so don't just say, hey, I can turn on this automatic restart and then just ignore all errors. That's not what it's there for. It's intended to be able to be an automatic restart without needing a site visit for those situations where the arc may be caused by a transient environmental issue like condensation in a junction box or something that is not truly a physical damage to the system that presents a ongoing safety hazard. And last but not least, the last update for the Core 1 that I want to present, this screen capture is from the California Energy Commission equipment list showing that the Core 1 US-41 models have the UL 1741 SB listing. We will be releasing a firmware update for the Core 1 to support the correct setting of what will eventually be required UL 1741 SB settings. So that is coming soon. Last update I heard was before end of year this year. So I think we should probably still be able to do that. So coming shortly, we will have another firmware update for the Core 1 US-41 to support the setting of required SB listing. So that definitely should be available by end of year. So I think another good update to the product line, and I think of great importance in Canada. Before we switch over to the third topic for today, let's take a pause and see if there are any questions for the Core 1 from the audience.
Yeah, so Lee asks, for the Core 1, are there any solutions available through SMA or elsewhere that protect MC4 cables as they connect into the inverter? For example, to guard the MC4 cables from rodents as they exit conduit and connect to the inverter MC4s?
Great question, and the answer is yes. It's not really an SMA provided part, but anyone who has that desire, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else at SMA. We have a dimensional drawing for a sheet metal shroud that can be constructed and would attach to the body of the inverter that would allow, and again, this is like physical touch protection. You're bending sheet metal, so I don't believe it's sealed fully, but certainly would prevent a rat or any type of rodent from accessing those connectors and would allow then connection of conduit to it. So definitely that is available for the Core 1 and we can provide it immediately. I did not mention, but along those same lines for the Tripower X line, the connectors to the inverter will be bulkhead style like the Core 1, but there will be an SMA accessory very similar, kind of folded sheet metal that will mount to the body of the Tripower X, protecting that area and will allow conduit to mate to it. So great questions, and yes is the answer to that. And anybody who wants the drawings for the Core 1, like I said, I can provide those via email immediately, so feel free to follow up with me.
Great. And somebody's asking, what is the SB listing about?
Oh, that is the topic for a whole nother webinar. The SB listing is, there has been an update to the documents kind of detailing all of the functionality that must be provided by grid interactive inverters. The IEEE 1547 document was updated in 2018, modified again slightly in 2020. The testing document 1547.1 was updated in 2020. So the SB listing will be a nationwide standard. I believe Canada's adopting it early, like January of next year. Certain areas of the US and the Northeast and California will be adopting it also as a required testing thing that any inverter submitted on interconnection plans will have to have successfully passed that testing. It is simply testing functionalities that the inverter possesses, whether or not they are turned on when the inverter is commissioned. So the testing is separate from turning on the functionalities. I mentioned the firmware for the Core 1. That will be a firmware update that will allow for easy access to potentially required settings. And hopefully, I don't know that this will be incorporated in the firmware. There is an effort afoot to allow for easy exporting of the parameter list once the inverter is commissioned, to provide documentation to a utility that any and all required quote unquote smart inverter functionalities have been supported. So this is the latest in a wave of updates of having grid interactive inverters be able to provide grid support functionalities. So again, it's a testing procedure to make sure the inverters support the functions, whether or not they're turned on. So you're still going to have potentially different jurisdictions, different states, different territories requiring different things, but the testing process, the UL 1741 SB listing, is simply verifying that the inverters can support these different functionalities, and it's up to the AHJ to determine which need to be turned on during commissioning. So that's about as short as an answer I can give. It probably doesn't answer the question, but.
And oh, we have another one here. I like the picture of the PEAK3 all mounted right next to each other. The Core 1 has a recommended spacing of 90 centimeters, 1 meter, 1 meter on 3 sides. This can be a bit tricky in electrical room. Any advice?
Yeah, and so that was actually a great question. As we said, that is a recommended clearances. The reason we do that, if you've worked with the Core 1, 3 sides of the Core 1 have potentially user swappable boards behind them. So one for areas of very high ambient temperature, we want the clearance for just good airflow, but primarily we're asking for that as a recommendation for ease of access to the inverter for servicing. For the PEAK3, all access is going to be straight from the front. So that's why there's less recommended clearances around the sides and in essence the back for that product. So again, as long as you're complying with all local and national codes, you can go in closer and impinge into the SMA recommended clearances, but just understand that you may be setting yourself up for more trouble when trying to service the inverter if you do that.
And that's it for now.
Awesome. No, great segue into the PEAK3 discussion. And again, this is more of an update. People may be familiar with the PEAK3. So what I'm going to talk about is we're changing from the -20 models to the -21, and then there will be a new product. I call it a whole new line within the PEAK3 family called the Flex. So the PEAK3 Flex. I believe this product is going to be primarily a repowering solution for putting new inverters in older PV systems, but I'll talk about both lines. The change from the US-20 to the -21 is not substantial. You'll notice there's some cosmetic changes. The LEDs have moved over slightly, but there is a new way for the front cover to attach to the inverter. So there will be a locking mechanism behind this center ring here. So slight changes to the cosmetic look of the line. And we're adding 2 new power classes, so slightly higher power classes that have slightly higher AC output voltages. So these are primarily meant for if you're doing a large system and you're tying into a transformer, having the ability to output on the inverter side at 660 may be immediately an option for the transformer you're tying into, and so having additional power per inverter for these multi-megawatt systems may be of use. So we're adding 2 new power classes. again, the power is going up by increasing the AC output voltage. On the data sheet, we're publishing a higher supported DC to AC ratio. And again, there will be the ability to exceed the datasheet DC to AC ratio if a design is constructed in Sunny Design and the output of that design for the specific system you're considering building has a full load hours metric that is under a certain threshold. And it's higher for the PEAK3 line than our other inverter lines. 3,000 full load hours right now is the limit. I don't believe that will change for the US-21 line. So that is a way to potentially exceed, without any impact on warranty, the datasheet DC to AC ratio. But otherwise, for the US-21 line, nothing else really has changed. The 1500 volt DC limit is obviously still there. The short circuit current limit will be the same and will be the same for the two new models. So it's really just an increase in power by adjusting the AC output voltage. And this style of adjustment is captured, but just more fully, a full spectrum capture on the PEAK3 Flex line. So we'll talk about that in a second. Again, I don't think anything else has changed. Storage and operating temperature ranges, weight of the device, all very much the same as the US-20 line of PEAK3. Again, there's the 3,000 full load hours. If you have any questions on the this process of wanting to go past the datasheet DC to AC ratio, feel free to reach out to anyone at SMA. Again, you will have to actually construct within Sunny Design the system you are intending to build. Not only will it output a certain number of kilowatt hours or megawatt hours per year, there is also this metric of full load hours that it will export for that specific design. And that is the metric you need to look at if you wish to exceed the DC to AC ratio on the data sheet of the device. But now kind of segueing into the PEAK3 Flex, this is and I'll call it a whole new line. I'm not even sure how we're going to sell this. This is a UL listed device that has a variable three-phase AC output voltage. So it is UL listed with a variable AC output voltage from 200 up to 660. We saw the 4 models that will be standard for the US-21 line, and they had 480 volt three-phase, 600 volt, 630, and 660 volt. So those are 4 different stopping points in this full range. We saw that the power changed based on the AC output voltage. So as you lower that AC output voltage, you will definitely be lowering the maximum power. So down at 200 volt three-phase AC output, this is a 52 kilowatt model. And again, that 663 phase can go up to 172 kilowatts. So you're definitely impacting the power when you adjust the voltage. The one benefit, you have a downside of lowering the power. One benefit is as you drop that DC and the AC output voltage range, you open up, you also drop the minimum DC input voltage window. So we'll show a graph that hopefully emphasizes that a little more visually. And while you may think, oh, this would be great, I have now this, it's a lower power class at 208 three-phase. Remember, this is a 1500 volt rated machine with a single DC input to it. There is no AFCI built into this device, so this is not going to be appropriate for a rooftop installation, a new rooftop installation, 208 volt three-phase output. So my thought is this will be very popular for the repowering scenarios where you have, a larger old, 10-year, 15-year-old central inverter. Maybe that one was working at 208 volt three-phase. Maybe it was 480 volt. You have potentially you have a situation where you have a 600 volt limit on the array because it's that old. So I see this as more a repowering device than a newer system device. But we have the range on the data sheet here. That's the MPPT operating range. Again, that will be dependent on what AC output voltage you're choosing. Obviously, the power will also be dependent. So this data sheet can, I think, potentially be a lot more confusing than the regular just US-21 models of the PEAK3, but I think can be a very, very useful device. And what I was trying to relay in words, the dependence of that DC input voltage window on the AC output voltage that is chosen for the device. There is not a transformer in the inverter. So at all times, the DC input voltage has to be a certain amount above the AC output voltage. So as that AC output voltage goes up, the minimum DC voltage also goes up. So at that 660 volt three-phase output, you have a fairly tight window on the DC input range. And as you expand that or lower that AC, I shouldn't say expand, each unit will have a set AC three-phase output voltage. As you lower that output voltage, you are widening that allowable DC input window. And again, this may be used for systems where the array, the modules are only rated to 600 volts on the DC side. So the array actually may be constraining this rather than allowing you to go up to 1500 volts. But I think this will be a very interesting product. Along the lines of using this in repowering, you may have constraints on the DC side by the rating of the PV modules. You may also have constraints on the AC side for output current limit. And the PEAK3 line has a maximum output current of 151 amps. But the PEAK3 Flex line, the output current limit will also be adjustable. So if you need to adjust that downward, you can. That obviously will have an impact on power. You can adjust the voltage. That may lower power. If you're adjusting that maximum output current, that will also limit the power. But that may be a very useful feature to have when using this device as a repowering device. So again, a very interesting, and I'm going to call it a whole different line because I'm not exactly sure how we will sell this. If someone will buy a PEAK3 Flex and then contact SMA to, buy a code to lock it at a certain AC output voltage, or exactly how that will be handled. So more details to come on this. And I find it a very interesting product, but more of a new weapon in the repowering toolkit versus a standard string inverter for new installs. But who knows, I could be surprised. Again, this will be the Highpower PEAK3, but the Flex moniker will be added to this model, and will have the capability of working in this whole range that is captured on this data sheet. The availability of the US-21 line and the Flex US-21 line, I'm not completely certain on. I'm pretty sure that this is coming soon next year, but I am uncertain if we are already taking orders and have pricing availability, certainly for the 4 models of the US-21 line. So I'm going to leave that as coming soon. Folks in the audience may actually have a little more concrete information than I do on the availability of this, so I apologize for that, but definitely coming soon. And the US-21 line for the PEAK3 will also have that UL 1741SB listing. I don't think I have that on a data sheet anywhere, but that will be available at launch of the US-21 models. And with that, I have come to the end of the technical material I would like to present, so definitely have some time for questions, or I can pitch a couple SMA service solutions.
A couple of questions here.
Yeah.
Another question on the Core 1, is there any recommendation for lightning protection or arrestor products that you recommend to be used with this product, ideally at 600 volt?
So for the Core 1 line, and this would be kind of integral to the inverter, so the DC definitely would be covering coming from the array, but the AC would be more on the output to potentially a 600 volt transformer. There are optional type 2 or type 1 and 2 SPDs available for both the DC side and the AC side for the Core 1, and those are accessory kits that can be purchased from SMA. The DIN rail to hold either the DC kit or the AC kit are built into the inverter. And while we're selling it as an accessory kit, I believe it's RayCap. They're the RayCap modules for both the AC side and the DC side. So those would be installed interior to the inverter. Obviously, if you have a 600-volt transformer there between the inverter and building service, there may be areas, you know, that wouldn't have that protection, but coming into the inverter from the utility side, and also then on the DC coming from the array to the inverter, you have that protection. Having said that, I don't think SPDs are going to protect an inverter from a close-by lightning strike, but it is better than nothing.
And we do offer those, just so folks know.
Awesome. And from what I understand, I don't know, you know, I don't purchase these on the open market. My understanding is the SMA price is actually quite attractive. So if you're interested in that, I think it's a slam dunk.
Great. For Highpower PEAK3 inverters, are there any plans to include AFCI in the US 21 models or future models?
I don't believe so, and a lot of that has to do with the architecture of the unit. My understanding is that it is impossible to find AFCI detectors that can work over 40, I believe it's 40 amps. It's some number that is significantly less than the amperage input of the PEAK3 based on its architecture. That's why we can have it in the Core 1, but not the PEAK3, as we're breaking up all of the inputs to, you know, it coming in to the inverter, and so those can be used for detection before they're combined. But the PEAK3, based on its architecture, I don't believe there exists a technology to accurately detect that on such a high current input. So if needed, it would have to be in the combiner box for the PEAK3, and then obviously there may be requirements on how the output of the combiner box is routed to the inverter. Maybe that has to be buried or clad in metallic a conduit, you know, kind of a MC cable. But based on the architecture of the PEAK3, I don't believe it will ever have the built-in AFCI.
And Charles asks, is there any data surge protection devices for the Core 1s where the Cat5 cables plug into the comms board?
No, there is not an option to add anything. I believe you can see in the install manual for the Core 1, I want to say we have listed up to 1.5 kV protection, but anything beefier than that, definitely SMA doesn't have like a standard accessory to purchase to protect that comms line.
Are there any more questions out there, folks? I think that's it for the moment, Mike.
Awesome. No, definitely great. And if I do have a few free minutes, I will definitely pitch, you know, SMA's smart connected service. So hopefully people are aware of this, but if people have an SMA system and they have registered on our monitoring portal, the Sunny portal, you have the option to opt in for no additional cost to the smart connected program. And if you enroll in this program, you're asking SMA service to begin proactively monitoring all of the communications between the plant and the Sunny portal servers. So we can provide via email diagnostic support for things that are just, you know, warning messages, down up to the level of if there is a certain error code from the inverter that SMA service knows that, you know, 9 times out of 10, seeing this error code for a plant like this is going to result in an RMA. SMA service can choose to proactively ship that RMA unit without having anyone gone to site to do troubleshooting before triggering the RMA. And for the Core 1, if you've gone through the board swap training, if it can be determined which board is at fault, that board can be shipped rather than a whole RMA unit. So this, I think, is a very attractive service. Again, no additional cost. Once the system is registered to the Sunny portal, you are opting in for free. So in the plant on Sunny portal, there will be a way to enroll in Smart Connected, and is very straightforward, and I think very, very worthwhile. So hopefully folks are aware of that, and it's available for Sunny Boys, for the Core 1s, will be available for the Tripower X, is available for the PEAK3. So that is I think a very valuable service.
Great. And Ben is asking if your email address is available.
Ooh, it most definitely is. And let me see, can I put this in the chat window for everyone to see? Let me see here, type message here. I will go ahead and do mine directly. The training at SMA America will work, but I'm gonna put my direct email there. Oops, to organizers and panelists only. Sorry, let me copy that again and put it to everybody. The send chat to, I do not have a choice to send it to all attendees. But it's Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, .Mahon, M-A-H-O-N, at SMA-America.com. Oh, there we go.
Great, Emma just put it in. And if anybody needs, we have it here as well and are happy to share it.
But yeah, please, forward on requests for the Tripower X to have a 12208 variant, and any requests for that sheet metal shroud drawing for the Core 1. I'm happy to send that out.
Great. Anything else, Mike?
No, I think that is it. And like I said, definitely we will be beating the drum early next year as we have more definitive dates for the launch of the Tripower X. And as we have firmware updates for the Core 1 that more fully support the 1741 SB listing, we'll be making noise about that. So I think there'll be a lot of announcements and information coming from SMA in 2023. It's going to be a busy year.
Excellent. Yeah, and thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate you taking the time to educate us here. To everyone, just a couple of items. If you haven't signed up for our web shop yet, I'd like to encourage you to do that. You can find spec sheets, pricing, inventory, install manuals. You can place orders, pay invoices, see incoming POs. Once again, this was recorded. It'll be on our YouTube channel, and it'll also come out each month during the newsletter. If you have more questions, please reach out to us. We have plenty of sales reps who are well versed with the SMA product. We have quite a bit on order. We've been a little short on it lately, but it's starting to arrive. The residential product, I believe we've had quite a bit just come in recently. And at the end of the month, quite a bit of the commercial product is coming in. So Michael, once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate our relationship with SMA. And everybody, thanks so much for taking the time, and hope everybody's doing well out there.
Indeed. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.